Hey guys, it's Rekt Capital. Welcome to today's video update. We're going to be talking about the article that I recently published. It's a sequel, part 2 to my very first initial article about the Bitcoin halving and everything you needed to know about it. I published that first article in October of 2019, and ever since it has been a useful resource for me personally, and I hope so for you as well. It's been a useful resource in understanding Bitcoin's historical price tendencies prior to the halving and after the halving. And ever since that article, I thought that I might as well make a sequel, a follow-up to that article, and this is the article, and we're going to be talking about it today. I hope you're having a wonderful day today, guys. Let's dive right into the article. It is sponsored by Clio.one, one of the partners on the channel here, but the main question that I want to address in this article is the disappointment in investors who bought Bitcoin and were anticipating a massive rally towards the upside after the halving. And the problem with this is that after the halving, we tend to see very specific price action. And in fact, it doesn't tend to be exponential. We don't tend to see sharp increases in price action immediately after the halving. So of course, in the months after the halving, we tend to see exponential rises. But in the immediate weeks after the halving, this is what I focus on in this article. And of course, Bitcoin's price action has been largely stagnant after the halving. It hasn't really been moving much, but is this normal price behavior? And throughout this article, that's something I'm going to be talking about. So post Bitcoin halving 1, we have to compare all these different halvings, specifically the periods after the halving. And if we compare all of these periods, as we'll go into a bit more detail throughout the video, we'll notice certain patterns and recurring price tendencies in Bitcoin's price history that will probably help us gain an idea as to what's going on at the moment and what could potentially happen in the future. At the very least, inform us what we have to look for in terms of trigger points and what the next trend could be. So after the halving 1, we have a very specific period of 6 weeks. This is the green box that just showcases a range, and it of course is a reaccumulation range, because of course this is an uptrend. We see a pause in that uptrend on the week of the halving, but afterwards we see a breakout in the first week after that first halving, and then we see a reaccumulation range, which then we see a uptrend resume. So basically speaking, this is a reaccumulation range which forms after that initial uptrend. So this is essentially a pit stop in an otherwise healthy growth cycle for Bitcoin. And of course, guys, this article is going to be in the description down below, so check it out if you'd like to see some more details. I am going to be covering the charts in this video, but of course the details are very much in the article if you just want to get a more extensive look at what was going on after those halvings. But in this reaccumulation period after halving 1, this period saw very narrow price action. We saw a lot of price compression here, but the main thing to bear in mind is after we broke out from this reaccumulation range, what was very important for price to do was to have a successful retest attempt of the top of this range. So after halving 1, we're zooming in here on the daily, because of course this was the weekly time frame. We're zooming in here on the daily because if we just cycle back very quickly to the weekly, we won't see a successful retest attempt. In fact, the weekly candle is just a breakout candle and of course a pullback candle in the next week, but not a picture perfect retest attempt of the range high of this reaccumulation range. So we can't really see that successful retest. In fact, on the daily, you can see that these retests, number 1 over here, number 2 over here, and number 3, we had 3 successful retest attempts of the range high, and we even had a lot of downward wicks tap into that reaccumulation range just to gain that buy support. Once again, just to promote that rally towards the upside. We had to do that 3 times, and every time we saw a very volatile downward wick just tapping into that liquidity. So we had 3 successful retest attempts. After a breakout, we don't tend to see that many retest attempts, but this is what needed to happen for Bitcoin to fully exit that range and then make a new all-time high in the months that followed. So the key takeaways here is that Bitcoin formed a 6-week reaccumulation range. Remember guys, this was a confirmed uptrend already, followed by a period of consolidation, which was essentially reaccumulation before moving upward. And later, of course, the next key takeaway is that upon breakout, price pulled back into the range high for 3 retest attempts. 1 is good, but 3, well, that's more than we could have hoped for. That was a very positive thing to see because we just saw price strength confirmation above this range high, and that's essentially what needs to happen for a breakout to really occur. And we got that on the 3rd retest attempt, that really good trend continuation afterwards. And the final key takeaway is that these successful retest attempts are pivotal. They are vital to ending the reaccumulation period and beginning a new uptrend. So let's focus on post-halving number 2. During the week of the halving, as opposed to what happened to halving 1, because of course we saw a small dip during halving 1 on the week of halving 1, on the week of halving 2 we actually saw a breakout rally. So that last piece of FOMO, that FOMO pressure of pushing price towards the upside, buyers buying in anticipation of significant price growth, but of course we later saw 4 weeks of downside, and in that 4th week we saw the basing period. Of course, we saw a long downward wick tap into lower buy orders, significantly lower buy orders, because this actually wicked past from $600 roughly speaking to $500 and even lower. It goes below the chart. But in any case, this is what really started that sell side exhaustion, where we started to see a basing period. And this 4th week was essentially bottoming out on the retrace. And in the periods that followed, or at least the weeks that followed, we had accumulation. So the reason I call this accumulation is because this was in a downtrend. And now we're seeing a bottoming out in that downtrend just to form that accumulation period for bargain buyers to scoop up cheaper Bitcoin compared to what buyers were buying at this point in time on the week of the halving. Here, the bargain buyers can accumulate and start the next cycle. So you see a breakout after that accumulation period and then some sideways movement again. But this sideways movement that happens after this breakout is also very important, because this is now the reaccumulation range. So this was bottoming out in a downtrend, and now that we're seeing a confirmed new uptrend following from that accumulation range, we're now seeing a reaccumulation range similar to the one we saw after halving 1, where essentially price is in an uptrend, but we're seeing a pit stop in an otherwise healthy growth cycle occur. So this reaccumulation lasted for 5 weeks. The accumulation period lasted for 4 weeks, compared to post-halving 1, where we saw 6 weeks of consolidation before a breakout to new all-time highs. So it's very important to just highlight here, as we're progressing throughout the article, that periods of consolidation are very much the norm for post-halving periods of Bitcoin's price action. But of course, post-halving 2, we had 2 ranges, as opposed to that 1 range after halving 1. But we have to bear in mind that the retest attempt is a significant technical indicator of a confirmed uptrend. So you can see that this successful retest attempt actually retests the range high of the old accumulation range, which actually lasted 4 weeks, and then we saw a breakout into a reaccumulation range. So price briefly wicked towards the accumulation range just to accumulate those last buyers, for those buyers to hop on the train and get into Bitcoin before finally breaking out towards the upside. So this is a very important thing, because we're seeing a breakout from this accumulation range followed by a successful retest. So that's that range pretty much done and dusted. So what about the reaccumulation range? Because now that the accumulation range is fully confirmed, what can we say about this range over here? Well, on the weekly time frame, we can definitely see that this is of course a breakout from the reaccumulation range, followed by a successful retest in the same week. And we essentially weekly close above this reaccumulation range, but then again, once again, before we really take off, there's the pullback to just test that range high as a new support once again. So 2 successful retest attempts, and the key takeaways. Well, if we just compare halving 1, post-halving 1 and post-halving 2, there is consolidation after the halving. A few weeks of consolidation after halving 1, 6 weeks. After halving 2, 8 weeks in total, on 2 occasions, but still 8 weeks to 9 weeks in total. So let's just bear this all in mind when analyzing post-halving number 3, the period of time that we are currently in at the moment, and we have to check the boxes here. There is a range that has lasted approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, but 7 of those weeks have occurred after the halving. And the thing to bear in mind is that this is, of course, a consolidation range that is $1,000 wide. We keep just cycling from range low to range high to range low to range high. Of course, it's great to see that we're indeed seeing a higher low right over here relative to this low. So relative to the range low of this candle, we're seeing a higher low. So that's a great psychological tendency just to observe on the macro scale, because people are buying Bitcoin on the dip at a higher price than they were a few weeks back. But in any case, this doesn't change the fact that we're still in a ranging period. And the thing to bear in mind here is we are not in accumulation, because accumulation happens after a confirmed downtrend. We're going to be talking about scenarios on what could happen next, but this is either a reaccumulation period, where we're seeing a pit stop in an otherwise healthy growth cycle, or this is a distribution period. And the thing about post-halving price action in Bitcoin's price history is that we don't see distribution. We tend to see reaccumulation, followed by exponential uptrends to new all-time highs. And we have to say that by standards of history, this is most likely a reaccumulation range. Now, we have to bear in mind, of course, that there is a possibility that we could see some distribution. A distribution scenario right over here would be this price action, and then we just add this price action to the mix, right? So just to repeat that, this is going to be the ranging period. Let's say this is distribution. We distribute from here, we break down from here, and then we're going to see something like this that we saw after halving 2. A retrace, followed by an accumulation range, followed by a breakout, and then a reaccumulation range in a confirmed new uptrend, which would precede further upside. That's the distribution scenario. But what we have to bear in mind is the key insights across all halving periods. Post-halving consolidation is normal. After halving 1, 4 weeks. After halving 2, 8 to 9 weeks, depending on how you look at it. And Bitcoin has been consolidating for 7 weeks as of this writing. So post-halving consolidation is normal. If anybody's disappointed in Bitcoin's performance after the halving, you really need to check this article out, because it is a historically recurrent tendency that Bitcoin sees sideways price movement in the weeks after the halving. Of course, you can talk about the months after the halving, which tend to see exponential upside, but we're in the weekly period at the moment. There are only a few weeks after halving 3, and those are the periods that we need to focus on when looking at Bitcoin's price history after the halving. The weeks immediately after the halving, that essentially translates into consolidation, and this has been the case time and time again, and it continues to be the case even now, despite there being 3 halvings already and many years in between them. So that's quite interesting to see. Key insight number 2 is that post-halving consolidation has preceded new uptrends. So this sort of post-halving consolidation has translated into either accumulation ranges or reaccumulation ranges. And for post-halving 3, it's probably a reaccumulation range, but we also have to bear in mind that if this is distribution, which would go against the grain of history, we'd probably see that scenario that I spoke about earlier of a retrace followed by an accumulation range and then a reaccumulation range. So this is essentially what I cover in this paragraph. But the last key insight, number 3, successful retests have preceded new uptrends. So what does this mean for Bitcoin's price post-halving 3? Well, if we cycle back to the chart here, and this indeed turns out to be the reaccumulation range, we will probably see a flick up, of course, from whichever point in this range. We'll see a flick up, a breakout past the range high of 9,750, followed by a pullback into this level, whether that's a week afterwards, or whether it's even during the same week of the breakout. Whatever the case may be, this level needs to turn into a new support, so it needs to be successfully retested before we actually see a springboard of price towards the upside. That's going to be a confirmed breakout, and that would probably mean that if we see that confirmed breakout, of course, that would probably mean that this will have been a reaccumulation range and we'll see further upside for Bitcoin going forward. So those are the key insights, guys. If you'd like to read this article in a bit more detail and understand all these different details about successful retests, all these different ranges, feel free to dive into the article. I had a lot of fun diving into this research myself and just compiling this article for your enjoyment. So definitely check it out in the description down below. I will leave a link for you guys there. So just to finish up, what is the conclusion to this article? Well, we tend to see consolidation after the halving, and we tend to see consolidation for a few weeks at a time. And of course, this time around, we could see a lengthening in that range. But we have to bear in mind that there are specific trigger points for what this could mean relative to the range. So what I mean by that is this breakout point here would mean that we can be bullish, and a breakout past here, or at least a breakdown, would be a bearish bias, of course. So reaccumulation or distribution, we know what the trigger points are. These are the specific trigger points for whatever bias we want to accommodate. Just to be objective and transparent for you guys, that's what we need to look out for. Very simple to understand what Bitcoin could potentially do, because those are the trigger points we need to watch out for. But by standards of history, this is a reaccumulation range. And consolidation post-halving is definitely normal. We tend to see consolidation after halving 1, consolidation after halving 2, and consolidation after halving 3. So it begs the question, is this time different? Is the Bitcoin halving number 3 different? By standards of Bitcoin's historical post-halving price tendencies, not at all. If anything, history is repeating itself. And that's about it, guys. Thank you so much for watching today. Please, of course, check out the article if you'd like to delve into a bit more detail to understand all the ranges, understand all the successful retest attempts. And having said that, feel free to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. Consider dropping a like if you enjoyed the video. And that's about it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Rekt Capital, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak soon.